Hello everyone, in this lesson I will tell you about break and continue statements. You have already met the word break in the lesson about switch. There, this statement gave the command to exit switch, but break can also be used with loops. Since you already know all loops, we can start showing examples of its use in loops. But first, let's look at the first example. Here I'm using the break statement incorrectly because it should be either in a switch or a loop. That's why the compiler is showing you an error. If you hover your mouse over the word, you'll see exactly what I said in the description. In the second block of code, we also have an error because the break statement should be used inside a switch or a loop. This doesn't mean that you can't use a break inside an if statement. It just means that here our if statement is not inside a switch or a loop. Let's look at the third block of code. It's fine because we're using the break statement inside a loop. How does it work here? When the program execution reaches this line of code, the program will exit the loop and execute all the following commands. That is, this is the command to exit the loop. Notice that we have an infinite loop here, but now you know one way to exit infinite loops. Later, I'll show you a more visual example of using the break statements in loops. Also remember that you can use the break statement as many times as you want in a loop, and it doesn't have to be a while loop. You can use a break statement in all loops: do while loop, for loop, and range-based for loop. Let's look at the fourth block of code. It contains code that is already clear to you. We know that thanks to the break statement, the program exits the switch without executing all the following commands of switch. Without the break statement, your program would find the needed case and then execute all the commands that are under this case. Let's look at the fifth block of code. It has a nested loop, which has a break statement. Question: how will the break statement work here? Answer: we will exit the inner loop and that's it. That is, thanks to the break statement, we can only exit the one loop in which it is located. To exit the outer loop, we need another break statement. Let's look at the next block of code. In it, we have a for loop, which has a switch, which has a break statement. Question: how will the break statement work here? Answer: we will only exit the switch. Therefore, again, the break command exits only the one switch in which it is located. Another break statement is needed for all outer constructs. Let's move on to real examples. Let me open the second project. In it, I wrote a simple game where the computer guesses the number 42 and the user has to guess it. It has an infinite number of tries, so we have an infinite loop. I create a constant that is responsible for the computer's number and a variable that is responsible for the user's number. Then I explain to the user what to do and give a hint about the range of numbers. Then we start an infinite loop in which the user will enter a number. If he guessed the number, we say so and exit the loop thanks to the break statement. Note that despite the fact that the break statement is in the if statement, it still interacts with the while loop because the break statement doesn't affect if statements. If the user enters another number, the computer will tell him whether it is higher or lower than the computer's number, and the user will try again. Let's run this game and play a little so you can see how it works. It is important to understand the following. A break statement inside loops is never mandatory. Any task that you solved with the break statement can be rewritten without it. For example, in this game, you could simply change the loop to do while and write the exit condition in it. But sometimes using a break statement in loops makes the code more understandable. Let's move on to the next construction, continue statement. Its task is also simple: to immediately move to the next iteration of the loop. Therefore, continue statement should be used only inside loops. Here, I use this command in many places and there are errors at the compilation stage everywhere because only in the last block we use continue statement correctly. If you hover the mouse over the word with the error, the compiler will write to you what I said. Let's look at more real-life examples of using continue. Here, I ask the user to enter numbers, indicating that he needs to enter 0 to stop entering. Next, we have an infinite loop in which the user will enter a number. If it is 0, we exit the loop thanks to the break statement. If he enters a negative number, we tell him about it and use continue statement. How does this command work? When the program execution reaches it, the program moves to the next iteration of the loop immediately. In this case, we will be thrown back to checking the condition, and since it is true, the first command of the loop. After this, the user will enter a number again, we will check it, and if it's positive, then the last command to display this number on the screen will work for us. Just like with break statement inside loops, all tasks should or can be solved without using continue statement. But sometimes it can make the code more understandable. For example, here I could have simply added else statement instead of continue statement, and everything would have worked the same. Let's run the program to see how it works. Let's look at another example. It's simpler. In it, I output all numbers from 0 to 100, but if we encounter the number 50, we will skip outputting this number. Let's run the program to make sure that we see all numbers except 50. What is important to know here? When you use continue statement inside while loop and do while loop, the command will throw you back to checking the condition. But in the for loop, this command will throw you back to this block, after which the condition will be checked. Imagine that the command throws us back to the condition. In this case, the number will always be equal to 50, and we will never move to the number 51. But the continue statement throws us back to the increment. Again, here it was possible not to use the continue statement, but simply rewrite the condition as if the number is not equal to the number 50 and output it inside if statement. The code would be shorter and clearer. I very rarely encounter the use of the continue statement in programming, and I myself very rarely use it. But it's one of the key words of the C++ language, so you should know how it works. And that's the end of this lesson. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can support me by liking this video, writing a comment under it, subscribing on the channel, becoming a sponsor on my channel to grant access to practice lessons, or donating me through the link in the video's description. All these things popularize my channel and motivate me to record more lessons for you. Goodbye.